Welcome, book lovers, back to our book club. Marisa Serafini here and Phil Svitek. This month, we are doing the Five Wishes of Murray McBride. Um, I found this book for I don't know if you've noticed the last few books I've been choosing have been like books about like good meanings of life or like the life is worth living, kind of those kind of themes. And I wanted to start 2025 off on like a more positive, happier note, I guess. I was like, oh, this could be like a good start for us. And then little did I know, but like we'll get into it. And, like it has a feel good kind of vibe to it. So Phil, what were your quick thoughts of it?
Yeah, I think overall I was hooked to the story right from the get-go, within the first 10 to 20 pages, certainly. And it felt very much like, those sort of classic feel-good movies of The Sandlot or Angels in the Outfield, not like necessarily plot-wise, but I guess, similarity, like there's a lot of baseball involved with this one for sure,
Hmm.
and it just has that heart. Now, I knew from the sort of get-go and just, seeing the picture, it's like, okay, it's about a 100-year-old guy and a 10-year-old kid with a terminal disease.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a lot of joy, but we're also gonna, for lack of a better term, be very tender. So, but I will admit, it was quite the page turner. And though you kind of get that there's going to be a gut-wrenching portion to this entire thing, the way it pans out is not the way I was fully expecting. And in some ways, I'm glad, and in other ways, I was also like, no, well, don't do that.
Yeah,
You
no,
know?
I agree, and we'll definitely get into it. But I was immediately sucked into because I like the personalities of both of these characters. You know, we have Mr. Murray McBride, the older 100-year-old man, and then a young Jason Cashman, who's the child. But just like they're so completely different ages, personalities, and you wonder how they will clash against, I guess you can say. But like actually, they worked really well. Reading it, I was like, oh yeah, this feels like a Lifetime movie, and I'm all for it. It hits those emotional beats, and then we had the conflict and all that. But I was like, yeah, I could totally see this being made into a TV movie.
Dude.
Um, Absolutely. So I was like, yep, it's one of those stories. So I don't know. I just came upon this book like on Amazon and stuff. I was like, it's one of those books that's like now making its rounds, and it wasn't like first well known, but now like through the word of mouth and stuff, it's gaining a lot of momentum in that way. So let's just get into it. You already mentioned the plot, but basically a 100-year-old man and a 10-year-old boy with a terminal heart disease type of lifestyle is like, oh no, like who my this is gonna sound terrible, but like reading it, I was like, who's gonna die first? This is like, I'm
Well,
really don't know. I'm really worried.
to be fair, I mean, the Murray himself, the 100-year-old, he also thought that. He was like, how odd. I mean, this is a little bit to, still the beginning, but he decides to become his big brother, and he's like, hey, between the two of us, we might barely have a year left.
Right.
You know?
It was like it's anyone's game right now. And I like the self-awareness because it kind of goes into the writing style. It was mostly told from like a one point perspective, first person perspective, but were you confused at the beginning? Because admittedly I did a little bit because it starts off as a older 30-year-old Jason Cashman in his first perspective, and then it switches to old man Murray. Well, I'm just gonna call him Murray. It switches to his perspective as an old man. What was that confusing for you to follow?
It wasn't confusing, although, there's a bit of a jarring factor because it's like it is being told to us through Jason as a recounting of what happened in his life when he was younger. And so to switch that perspective and more so make it first person from Murray is a little bit different. But,
Right.
I think. I think part of that, the way I sort of, I guess, justify it ultimately is that, this is 20 years down the line. So I feel like Jason's put himself into, the shoes of Murray and all that, and kind of had various moments recounted to him and stuff like that. And so, in order to make it as impactful, like he's trying to tell Murray's story. And so I guess what better way to do that and honor him than to tell it from that perspective, literally.
From Murray's perspective. Yeah. It honestly it took me a minute because we're going from like a 30-year-old to a 100-year-old to but in the mindset of like we know this was written by the author and we'll get more into it, but like the author is a younger man in his 30s. So like when I read it, it didn't feel like a 100-year-old. It felt like a young 30-year-old but in the body of a 100-year-old. So like I think it's just the writing style was not to say that like you can be 100 and like not slow on your language and stuff, but it's just like reading it felt like someone who's like really cute in the mind and like still doesn't have like age problems or mental disabilities and stuff. It's like still very a functioning human being. And I didn't really get that with Murray in his point of view, which is a good thing because I could understand everything he was saying, despite his quote unquote age. So like really the story starts off as like Murray, he's in his old age and he's like already deciding, it's like, okay, if I don't take this pill, I'll basically my lungs will fill up with fluid and I'll just end my life and just like let nature take its course. And he already decides like his last day. But ironically, he's like, all right, on my last day, let me do something good. Let me go to the hospital and go to the cardiac ward and like talk to people and volunteer and stuff. And that's where he meets this young Jason Cashman. And so the story begins. What were your thoughts of how they started Murray and his perspective of like life and how it like slowly changes throughout the book once we get more into the relationship of Murray and Cashman. But like, what did you think of Murray's arc?
Yeah, I mean, we meet Murray and he's quite literally got pretty much nothing to live for, right? So his wife had passed away, they said 18 months, and that was a very fruitful relationship of 80 years, right? Like that's crazy. Like to imagine, like people want to live to be 80, let alone have
Right.
like a 80-year marriage. And so you could, just that in of itself, the bond and the kinship there, you imagine is already very big. And add to that, like his sons had already passed away, right? So it's always, that sort of aspect, right? Borrowing from Lord of the Rings, like a father should never have to bury his son. It's usually the
Hmm.
sons that bury the fathers. And yes, he does have a grandson, but for lack, ultimately, it's one of those that, he doesn't really love the grandson. The grandson's kind of like a piece of shit in his mind that just wants to get the inheritance because he was once a great
Right.
baseball player and stuff like that. So, it very much is in this way of Jason needs Mr. Murray as much as Mr. Murray needs Jason, and quite literally gave him a reason to live. And it becomes that weird, as it develops, it's almost like Elliot and E.T., where they're fusing,
Mm.
and what
It's
one
like,
feels, the other feels.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
definitely. It's like you kind of need an external motivation to keep going. And Murray got to that point where like, well, I have nothing else to live for. But then he sees the flip side of a young child who hardly has lived, and it's just not fair for him to have there's a quote who's like, it's not fair that God made me live 100 healthy years and this kid has a bad ticker, when it comes to his heart. So like he sees like how like life is just fleeting and precious no matter what age you are and it's worth living, having meaning to keep living, and just like find happiness and stuff like that. So they strike up a friendship, young Jason Cashman and Mr. Murray, through this Big Brother program. And lo and behold, we find that Jason Cashman has a wish list. 5 wishes that he likes to basically his bucket list before he dies, unfortunately, because he's only 10 and they only gave him like a few months to live. What were your thoughts of the list? Well, like we'll go through them, but as a young kid who has to kind of like make this list to keep going or have something to look forward to, I want to hear your thoughts. But first wish is kiss a girl. Second, hit a home run in a Major League Baseball stadium. Third, be a superhero. Four, find a nice boyfriend for mom, Jason's mom. And five is do real magic. So your thoughts on the wishes?
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, you're like, okay, these are awesome. How the hell are you gonna get them done? You know?
Right.
So that's kind of the trick of it. And part of the whole framing was that when we entered this story, right, this retelling from Jason, the 30-year-old, he frames it as, Murray taught me that there is real magic in the world, right? And so, you kind of anticipate just by that framing that these will be pulled off, and how it's going to be done. That's what made it quite the page turner. Um, but certainly, yeah, I mean, Murray himself was the one who took on that stress of it all, right? Like I think in the end, wanted to retain as much innocence for Jason because he is just a 10-year-old kid, in spite of, you know, uh, Murray constantly berating Jason for his, dude, what's up? Or
Dude.
like, like, what are you talking about, bro?
Sweet sweetness. And like I did love that interaction because like you do have that the age versus the youth. Like, no, respect your elders. I'm not a dude. I am Mr. Murray. Like, and I love that playful dynamic too. But also, we see Murray, yeah, he takes it upon his responsibility to like help, see these wishes out. But also he just kind of takes on that surrogate father role that Jason definitely doesn't have with his own father, Benedict Cashman. What a dick. What are your thoughts of Benedict and like just a young 30-something-year-old father dealing like making he's obviously a businessman providing for the family financially, but definitely not providing for his family emotionally. And that's therein lies the clash with him and his son and not being the father figure that he should be. And then Murray becomes basically that surrogate father for him. So what were your thoughts of that dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, in an odd way, I understood it, right? And we didn't get as much of Benedict um, overall, right? It's a few short interactions, and we get a lot more through the perspective of Murray. Um, but I can understand it, and in an odd way, you know, Benedict is like the salvation for Murray in and of itself, because that's what Murray kind of used to be for the most part.
Mhm.
It feels like Benedict is making more money ultimately than Murray did back in the day because he had to have a second job. But like, I mean, Murray has a lot of regrets about his sons, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
so, yeah, it's kind of interesting, to see that, and that's why I feel Murray is so invested, especially in that relationship, to get Benedict to be like, hey, wake up, like I messed up, but you don't have to. But then again, I understand it from that perspective of Benedict. Like he's, especially in this situation, he is doing what he can in his own way, like misguided or not, like he's just trying to use money as a vehicle to save his kid's life.
Right.
So I get it. It's not, you still need that love aspect, and that's certainly missing, but the actions just he's still doing something, just not in the best way.
Right. And that's the thing. I was like, I wanted to hate Benedict, but I totally understand like a young man or anyone in that position, like they don't know how to deal with the imminent death of a young child. And like they're probably not going to deal with it emotionally in a very mature way. So like the way that he knows is just business. Just keep working, just keep providing finances and money and stuff. And like that's his way of helping, quote unquote. Um, but I like how Murray was like the one who's like, yo, wake up. Like you have a child who's literally going to die any day now, and you're just already emotionally distancing yourself from this child. That's not what he needs right now. I love how like Murray like really gave that message. But Benedict pushing Murray over, shoving him, I was like, well, what kind of man shoves one? Like, what kind of man just like fights like that? Just because his feelings were hurt and he was basically being called out on his shit. And then second, like you're pushing an elderly man who has like no defenses and stuff. I'm like, Are you kidding me, Benedict? Are you kidding me? I'm like,
Well,
that's ridiculous. I
unfortunately,
got really mad at that.
yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's what happens when you don't really process your emotions, right? And Murray, it's one of those things like he hit the exact trigger to be able to pull that off, right? So I'm
Yeah.
not justifying it. I'm just simply stating why it happened, right? Um,
Right.
but in that sort of odd way, uh, even though it did happen, at least Benedict starts to become a changed person. At least we get
Mhm.
glimpses of that. So as gruesome as it may have been, and it's also interesting, like let us not forget, like I think Murray's a wonderful character, but he's also very deeply flawed. Like even to this day, he knows that he doesn't have much time. He knows he's kind of been an asshole, and he's got his only one grandson, Chance, and in his mind, he's having this inner dialogue of all the things he wants to say to Chance, and he's like, "I'll see you later." Like,
Yeah.
what? Tell him you
Yeah,
love
and
him.
that's the ironic thing that we read as, the audience members, like throughout the whole books. Like, there's always that internal dialogue with Murray. It's like, hey, time is limited. Make sure you say everything you want to say to your loved ones. And yeah, he can't even do it for his relationship to Chance. And but I did love how Chance came around because like every interaction we had with Chance, the grandson, is always like Chance is always he's like that impatient young person. It's like, why you shouldn't be living by yourself. You should, be in an assisted facility where like no one has to worry about and just take care of you and stuff. And he's kind of like pushing like you're old, you need help. I can't do it because I'm too busy, but like you can't just keep doing it. So he's already like bringing Murray down and like looking at him negatively. But when we see and keep reading all the interactions, like Murray thinks that, yeah, chances after his inheritance, but we see there's actually a more sentimental, side to it. Chances like, no, I wanted your baseball glove because you were basically my surrogate dad. Um, because my dad wasn't around to play catch in baseball and like you were. So it's like you see these different generations of how like having absent fathers but like other people making up for that. And like it definitely makes sense why Murray is doing that to the same to Jason. But it kind of heals the relationship between Chance and Murray. It's like, no, like, yeah, I may not understand everything you are now, but there was always love and I always respected you. And I always like bragged to you about your MLB career to my friends and stuff. He's like, no, it's more because I always loved you. I'm like, oh shoot, they got me. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
so like, yeah, oh yeah, keep going.
no, I mean, yeah, it speaks to that all the generations really need each other, and if nothing else, right, like that swath of time that we're shown where, yeah, we're all interdependent on each other. And, funny enough, as I was reading this, it really put me, and I think that is the benefit of having it told first person through Mr. Murray McBride overall, is because we get that viewpoint that we don't often consider, right? Like just a quick anecdote, if you will. So they built these Amazon boxes, right, at the front of the building. So they no longer deliver it to your door. They put it in there, and then you got to go on the app and and then it opens,
Yeah.
whatever. First off, it's already annoying because sometimes, it could be either really quick or I'm waiting there for like 5 minutes for it to connect to the damn locker. So number one. Number two, also like, I don't know, I was carrying this like semi-heavy box, and I'm like, how would old people do this, both from the technological side, but also like if it's a heavy box, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm sure there probably are services, but again, like from the perspective of someone older, it's like where do you even begin to like, look at all of this? And so that dichotomy of, you know, um, Murray working like at the email machine,
Hmm.
and it being so second nature to Jason, it really exemplifies that. And, we just, uh, in many ways, don't consider other perspectives. And so, and we need to, and whatever else. So that was kind of interesting in that way, and yeah, as far as Chance, the whole worry of, him, like again, it comes from a good place, that he wants his grandfather to be kept safe. But, like all things, no different than like a helicopter parent. It's like you got to let your kid bump and bruise. And
Hmm.
this is just the reverse situation of like, listen, you got to let your granddad live his life. Like staying
Right.
alive isn't the thing. Like he should also have good memories as well.
Yeah,
So,
and also don't judge him too. But I love how you bring up the technology. Like I find that's like always a running theme with like the older generations don't know how to do technology, and something as for our current generation who grew up within the internet world and emails and stuff, and this young 10-year-old knows how to email. And like this is where I was like, a 10-year-old wouldn't be emailing anymore, they'd be texting. But if you're thinking about 20 years ago, which is our age, at like 10 preteen years, like, oh yeah, we were emailing. It totally makes sense. I had an email at 10, 11. I was like, yeah, that was actually believable. So to have these two like really start bonding over like the antiquated version of emailing, I thought was actually pretty funny. You can hear their different ways that they speak to each other, dude and sweet, and like the improper grammar that Jason has compared to an elderly Murray. But like even throughout like the evolution of the emails, like how more serious they got and how more people got involved. And it was just like another level of their communication, which I really appreciated. And we'll get into the wishes as well, but it will also we would totally be remiss if we didn't bring up Tegan Rose Marie Atherton. She plays a big vital role in this book, a lot bigger than you think. And what were your
that's
thoughts of Tegan? She's basically the young girl next door. Um, but like she's a go-getter. Like and she's always there helping Murray and Jason, just being like that positive light, consistent positive light that they both need.
yeah. I mean, it's funny how Tegan is kind of like the child that Murray wishes Jason was. All proper and
Hmm.
athletic and whatever else. Like Jason's kind of a klutzy kid. Not a lot of talent there. Um, and whatnot. So yeah, and I mean, major spoiler. I thought Tegan for sure was going to be his wife at the end. And
Hmm.
I also thought perhaps like she would be the girl that, she would be number one, like they kissed on the lips or something like that. Um, nope, neither happened.
Oh, and unfortunately, like that kind of also took me by surprise. Like we should have seen it, but we yet it like we didn't, or at least I didn't. And I was like, oh crap, they got me. But like I think it was good because yeah, we have two guys, and so it is always nice to kind of like bounce it out with a girl who's like in the middle, in between, and just having a female perspective. And I guess it naturally just adds a more nurturing aspect. But like even her background with her mother, like the healthy relationship she has with her mother, being strong, brave, kind, the whole reoccurring theme of SBK, the positive thoughts, like that was instilled into her, and now she's instilling it into these two guys, and I really enjoy that for someone who's so young. She's very precocious and wiser beyond her years.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part of the tragedy, right? Is that her and Murray bonded so well over like history, right? Specifically women's baseball. Um, and that was a very nice thing because, here's finally an adult male that Tegan can look up to, right? That is healthy for her and also is encouraging her to be anything that she wants, aka in this case, like you predict that she wants to really be a baseball player.
Hmm.
Um, and so in many ways, that's the tragedy of it all. And yet, I guess, we can also bring in her, like, so Jason has her make her own wish list. And this is, I guess,
Hmm.
if you and I are gonna like look back on this is maybe where we should have known that
Yeah, I
someone.
know. Like
So,
crap. The
um,
signs were there.
and so her list was far less ambitious than
Hmm.
Jason's, and she managed to accomplish it all. Um, but yeah, I mean, I it is so tragic because you just felt like she had a future. I mean, at the start of the book, she was the most likely to have a future.
Right.
And yeah, it was gut wrenching for sure.
Yeah. So her wishes were have milk duds for a year, or like that stock up a year long's worth of milk duds, rides around the block in a convertible, kiss a beautiful man on the cheek, raise $1 million for the homeless people. And this was a lifelong lasting kind of list that kept going. And when you're reading it, because admittedly, I did go back and like reread some chapters and stuff, and like I missed it the first point because like we're so focused on Jason's list, we're not focused on hers, and like that's where it's a good misdirection, and hence the twist because she is also fulfilling her list as well. That the whole kiss a beautiful man on the cheek when fast forward ahead when both Jason and Mr. Murray's in the hospital. And like she kisses Mr. Murray on the cheek. I was like, oh crap. That's so sweet. So it's not in the conventional way that you think. It's she is still fulfilling her wishes herself. And I love how like Murray's fulfilling both of their wishes. Um, in that way. It's just like everybody's fulfilling each other's, wishes and hopes and dreams and stuff. And I'm like, that was really, really touching. Gosh darn it. Um, yeah, and so like let's going back to a bit of Jason Cashman's list and how he actually uh succeeded. First kiss a girl on the lips. He tricks his crush Mindy Applegate to kiss him, leading her to believe it's from her crush, Jared Miller. What are your thoughts of this and like how they plotted this this
Well, listen,
scheme?
I'm curious to hear your thoughts because I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was pretty devious. I mean,
It was.
out of this one, I thought for sure this one was like, hey, just get a woman, a girl, whatever, and be like, this kid's dying. Can you just give him a peck on the lips? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like,
Just like a make-a-wish kind of thing.
yeah, you know, and it's
Oh,
it's I don't know, for lack of a better term, maybe a little bit skeevy in that regard, but it's like, okay, you're gonna deny a dying kid like a quick kiss,
mhm.
whereas like in this regard, I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious to like he took it to a whole nother level. They both did.
Yeah, you know what? I gotta applaud them because one, yes, very devious, very sneaky, but in a very smart, brilliant, evil way. And I just have to remember, all right, this is 20 years ago. Like that would not fly now in today's society, not PC. But kids 20 years ago would totally do that. Before social media, before like they actually had to talk to each other in order to get something. So knowing a little kid was like he had to trick a girl into kissing her. Like normally I'd be against that, but that's what kids would do. Totally. And that's also a reflection of what young Murray would probably do when he was 10 years old. So it really makes me wonder like what was Murray like as a kid? You know?
Yeah.
But I appreciate that like he did help Jason succeed that first wish. And when that happened, like Jason just had like the biggest smile. And like the whole message was like, is Mindy the girl worth, making risks for, getting out from under your rock because Murray had that and he was too afraid. And like he's imparting these words of wisdom to Jason. It's like, just do it. Just make that risk. That's part of life, making risks.
Yeah, I mean, this one definitely reminded me of the Sandlot, right? When a minor spoiler for that movie, but the kid like tricks the local lifeguard into giving him CPR and then he starts
Yeah,
making out
right.
with her. So
Kids do it. That's
you know,
exactly what kids do.
yeah, so it reminded me of that, and again, I think part of the theme of the whole book in general is, how much can you justify if it's for the right reason, right? And it's,
Right.
so we'll get away with
And we
this. But
know, yeah, and we know it wasn't malicious. It was actually a very, very innocent thing that a young boy just wants to do because you can assume that this boy has never kissed a girl. And yeah, that's one of, I feel like that is a recurring wish that most young boys would probably have, you know? So the second one hit a home run in an MLB's stadium, which fortunately, Murray being a former Cubs player, he had the connections, he made it happen. Your thoughts of how this all went down? First of all, kidnapping of Tegan and Jason inadvertently, but totally purposely. Like Murray knew full well what he was doing, but he's like, I'm too old. There's not going to be anything. Still goes through with it, and Jason does manage to hit the home run, but unfortunately also collapses afterwards. But like how that all went down.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of buildup before that ultimately happens, you know. So there was a part of me of how are we going to get all these other wishes done? Like we've been trying to just get this. And so, yeah, I mean, as far as seeing the dots connect to, him getting the MLB stadium, it was like, okay, that's easy enough. The real question, right? And even for Murray, how the hell is this kid going to hit anything? This kid sucks.
Right. It's like he's got an oxygen tank right next to him. Like he doesn't even have the physical capacity to hit a home run and stuff. And I love how like Murray does take him, to batting practices and all that. So like we can work up to this moment. Um, but and I think that's like what Murray had, and it's like because he knew what that was like. He knew the thrill of being successful and having a successful moment in baseball. And he just wanted to do the same thing for Jason. So like good on him. And that kind of like sparks this whole Tegan sticking up for or like arguing against these boys and actually Jason sticking up for Tegan. Be like girls can play baseball and then he gets into a fight. Like this little boy who has to have it oxygen tanks next to him is beating up kids and being defensive, and I thought that was a really sweet moment.
Yeah, no, that was fun because they set it up nicely where they defined what a superhero was of like saving the Dane, and he didn't even know
Hmm.
what the hell that really meant
Yeah.
ultimately. And so the fact that he essentially just like what is it like kicks the kid in the groin and walks away, and he's like, I saved the Dane.
Yeah, I said the damsel in distress,
You
like not
know,
all superhero rare capes. And that was like one of those things like, oh yeah, he did just become a superhero. He fulfilled his own wish.
yeah. I mean, it's a little bit funny. I don't know if Teague would like say that she needed saving, but you know what? In his mind, she did. So have at it.
Yeah, and just the fact that like Jason has the courage to even do it. And I don't think he would have been able to do it had he not had the influence of Murray right next to him, like sticking up for women. And I really appreciated that. The fourth one was kind of like a running thing throughout the book. I was like, did this one ever happen? And then like I had to go back. I was like, all right, yeah, there were moments there. So find a nice boyfriend for Jason's mom. um, I love the moment where he tries to set up his mom with Dr. Derek Lester on a dinner date, and it just completely fails. It was like he tried. He tried.
Well, he also tried in the worst way possible. He essentially said, "My mom likes to like." Pretty much in kid terms, he essentially said, "Pardon my mom likes to fuck. Come on over."
Yeah, she needs someone like mortified. I was like, oh, what? That it reminds me of if you ever seen the movie Pay It Forward. Young Trevor McKinney does that for his mom. He tries to set up his mom with his teacher, and like the mom's like, oh well, I have all this food. I guess since they're here, I guess we can eat it. And then the kid just leaves the parents alone and like sets up a candle and dinner, and like he definitely set that up. So like it had those kind of same things. Like kids would do that for their
But that's a
parents.
lot more innocent than like again, like the stuff that Jason had prompted the doctor to think of his mom. I
Like,
mean, the doctor literally thought she was a slut.
like, oh, well, awkward, awkward.
And
But you do have to appreciate young Jason trying to do that for his mom, like a good thing. But actually, throughout, we get all these small moments where, she actually meets, well, so the mom's name, Anna. He she meets Collins Jackson, who is the art director of all these art lessons that Murray's going to and modeling for. Also, aka Handsman. But they keep interacting a bit, and every once in a while, when you see each other, or like they're looking at each other, you're like, oh, sparks are flying. Something's happening here. And that was kind of just like, I don't know what you call it, kismet, just convenient, but also simultaneously very cute.
Yeah, I mean, th this part of it, if anything, I felt maybe could have been the part that was fleshed out a little bit more, but it works overall, and it has its humor, right? So they come in on Marie's class, and they're like, "You're not gonna get naked, are you? Just my shirt."
Just my shirt. But also the interesting thing about the art, even if so, like there's this whole running theme of dichotomy of youth and old age. Even we have older Murray, young Jason, and in the art shows we have like this older male figure subject and a younger person subject. Like there's always like youth against elderly, and I thought that was a really really interesting take. And it's nice, and even like Murray is like, I'm not beautiful. They're like they're saying that I'm beautiful, but this is just like my pure age and liver spots and stuff. That's just natural. So it's like he has this like very realistic perspective about age.
Yeah.
And so going into kind of bleeding into our fifth wish for Jason, do real magic. So unfortunately, after the second one, after hitting a home run, Jason collapses there in the hospital. He's not doing good. His days are very, very limited. Um, yeah, this all how this all went down. Honestly, it felt very fast, very quick, but also painless because, or like painful because during these moments, they are both of them are so close to death because Murray's also in the hospital too because Dick Benedict pushes him over, and then we find out that Murray also has stage 4 bone cancer. Like crap, they're both dying. And they're put in the same hospital room, but all these conversations are now becoming like way more real. And like they're really aware of their mortality. And they're like, what do you think dying is like? What's it feel like? It's like, is it falling asleep and never waking up? Is it beautiful? Is it painful? And you're like, oh, the 10-year-old boy shouldn't be having this conversation. And but that's the reality of what they were in. So like just even from like the first interactions of their emails and dialogue at the beginning of the book to now very serious moments between, like they've really gotten to the point of respect and how they talk to each other. It's just like he's not talking to a little boy anymore. He's talking to a person who's also going through life. Just like that evolution of the seriousness of the conversation. What are your thoughts of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's in a way haunting from the perspective that ultimately, right, like, you know, as a kid, obviously these conversations are very deep, but sometimes you end up having them like if a grandparent dies or something like that, right? Where they have this curiosity around life and death and what does that mean? Um, in this particular case, obviously there's the immediate aspect to, he's asking for himself. And then what becomes the haunting part is that, he can at least in hindsight start to understand Tegan's death, right?
Mhm.
Because Dan, you start to wonder of like, you, what it was like for her, um, and we get the recounting of what ended up happening, and kudos to Tegan's mom for like that was some quick work because I don't know if I could ever
Yeah.
like be in a traumatic situation like that where, you know, a family member, let's just say, dies. And then my immediate thought is, well, I know somebody who needs a heart, so take my dead family members.
Yeah.
Like,
Um,
wow, that was a lot in a few pages.
it was, but also not uh not surprising because how we see Tegan and her relationship with her mom, like SBK, strong, brave, kind, like that was just like their who they were as people. So like Tegan, she wanted to go out and get candy for Jason. Like she's always thinking about others. Like that's the reason they even went out in the first place because she was thinking about someone else. And then she learned that from her mother. So like her mother's a very thoughtful person too. So it makes sense that her mom would be like, "Oh crap. There's a situation happening. Let me save this little boy. If I can't save my little girl, I'm gonna save this little boy." And that makes sense. I'm not surprised about that at all because, like, fortunately, they are that good-hearted people that we need in the world. Um, that one, I admit Tegan's death like hit me really fast and hard, unfortunately. Um, because you read this entire book and you're hearing like the slow doom, the slow imminent death of both of these two kids, or like the kid and the boy, and Murray. It's like that's gonna happen. It's like the slow build up, and then Tegan's just happened so fast, and we're not even thinking about her. You're like, all right, death occurs at any moment. We don't know. We could be prepared for it and we could not be. So like even just like we knew death was gonna happen, but it didn't happen in the way that we thought it was gonna happen. And
Well, yeah,
Tegan ended up, giving her heart and giving more life to Jason.
yeah. I mean, I guess naively thought, right? So with Jason, we know he's going to live because of the framing device of the whole book, right?
Right.
And towards the end, Murray starts to get very psychotic in a good way, where he's like, "I want to give the kid my heart," and they're like, "That's not possible." And he's like, "I'm gonna die anyway. I want to die now." And because he passes, you know, I was like, okay, maybe they got his heart and we're able to do it now. I don't know. I'd have to ask my mom, who's a cardiac nurse, of how it works with 100-year-old heart. I think just the size, obviously, like that's an adult heart into a kid, and
Right.
then also
And
like,
blood tissue types, and I was like, that would not fly.
yeah. So I don't,
But
I
like
don't.
I appreciate the notion behind, I don't like the thought behind it.
So in a sense, we knew kind of it would have to take a miracle because he was the way they framed it. He was number two on the waiting list, but if something locally happened, he can be bumped up. And so you were like, okay, something. So we kept getting that, like that was a big like thing in our face of like, hey,
Right.
something local needs to happen. That's the miracle. They're like, okay, well, what's going to happen? And I don't know. Yeah, it's just that thing of like, well, maybe the 100-year-old guy's heart will be the heart that he needs.
Yeah, Murray's right there. He's in our periphery. Like he's literally right in front of our faces offering his heart.
Yeah.
But then we're not even, unfortunately, we're not thinking about Tegan, who's also the same age as Jason. Like we should have seen it. The signs were there. And even when I went back to the beginning of the book, when older Jason was like, and Tegan, this young, spiritful girl, she gave me a lot more than everything. I was like, oh crap. He even told us at the beginning of the book that Tegan
Because I
gave
thought it was his wife.
him more.
I
Yeah.
thought she gave him a loving life with kids and
Yeah,
home and,
crap.
you know,
Tegan gave him everything. Tegan gave him his heart for him
yeah,
to keep living. Like crap. Like all the signs are there and they got us. They got us.
yeah.
Um, so unfortunately young Tegan dies. Jason receives the heart. Old Murray dies also, but like Murray finally, fortunately, like his end, he got to say the things he wanted to say, basically. And he got to like give his message to Jason and his impart his words of wisdom. Were you okay with the death of Murray?
Yeah, I mean, it felt honest, it felt true. And, the father came there, gave him his last rites. I love that he still joked about, I haven't gone to confession or whatever. He's like,
Right.
I think I'll be forgiven. Um, so yeah, and oddly enough, like I still think there was like certain things unsaid, and yet it was done in the way that is befitting of Murray. Like him and Chance reconciled. Like, did they have like a pitch perfect script of what they exchanged? No, neither with Jason, but you could tell that bond and you know that they had the moment they needed. It might not have been the words exactly, but the moment was true. So.
Yeah. And I loved how like they both literally helped each other through life, despite, their age and their health. But it's just like they needed each other both in that moment. And I thought that was a beautiful relationship that we see. And it kind of there are like so many different elements of this book that you can like pick and pull from other media and other stories and stuff. Like you have, Disney up. You have an old man and a young kid. You have like the whole wish list. So it's like I just keep thinking I'm gonna show my millennial age a watch and remember. She's dying and she has a personal list that she wants to. So it's like, and you see all these like different aspects of just like how to keep motivated and keep just living life, even if there's a definitive timeline. Um, I don't know. It's a beautiful message, and I really did. This book really surprised me.
Yeah,
Um, and I
yeah, it was
think
good.
more people should read it.
Yeah, I definitely. It's a quick enough read, like I said, it's a page turner, um,
Mhm.
and yeah, you will bawl your eyes out, and but that's not a
Oh
bad
my
thing.
God. Yeah, it's a good thing I was by myself reading the book because it hit me. I was like, no, damn it. Um, yeah, but like the reception of the book is actually pretty good. And ironically, when it started, so the author Joe Siple, um, he was starting off his writing career, but he got rejected so many times, like 28, 29 times and stuff. So he got to the point where like he just wasn't accepting. He's like, all right, but whatever, it's a story and stuff. And then this one finally got accepted to get published. But then when it got released, only a couple hundred got bought. And so that kind of like went against his. It's like, oh, it's just a story. No one's liking it, whatever. Like I finally got published, but no one's reading it. But thanks to pandemic and just word of mouth and the power of that is the internet and Amazon, just like it started gaining traction. More people were reading it, and then now it's spreading like throughout the world internationally. It's like people are reading it, people are resonating with it. And like we're doing our due diligence telling people to read this because like I found this book because I was looking specifically for books about like the meaning of life and like enjoying stuff like that, and this one came up and I'm like, oh great, more people need to read this. And I think it caters to a lot of different ages too and a lot of personalities. It's like this is a book that kids should read. It's a book that adults should read.
Yeah, no, it's certainly really well done. Again, it makes you, yeah, it reorients your perspective, so
Yeah,
accomplishes that
absolutely.
really well.
So if there's anything else you might want to add to, or
No,
pretty much covered it.
I think that's it. I mean, again, wonderful cast of characters. I know we focused on Murray and Jason and Tegan in particular, but you know,
There are a
Anna.
lot of other players too that helps throughout.
Yeah, shout out to Javier Gonzalez, the new Cubs baseball player who helped them
Yeah,
out and was a real guiding light for all of them as well. Um,
yeah. Javier got a lot of things done for them. He also like made Wish come true as well.
yeah,
Um,
so
yeah, everyone played their role, quite
yeah,
honestly. There was not like one throwawayable character, which is nice.
no, not at
Um,
all. So
all right.
really.
So what other books have you been reading for fun?
So I did finish the Posthumanist Memoirs of Bras Cubas by Joaquim Maria Machado de Assis, which is like
Wow.
regarded as Brazil's like what Gabriel Garcia Marquez and 100 Years of Solitude is for Colombia. That is what Bras Cubas, the book, is for Brazil. So this was written in the 1800s, the late 1800s, and it's pretty funny. And I wish like I understood Portuguese to like read it in its true form, because it's obviously translated into English. So I'm sure some of the humor gets lost, but it's pretty funny. It's stylish and whatever else. Not for everybody, but definitely I enjoyed it. And now I've started reading Homer's The Odyssey.
Ah,
Now, when I went
classic.
to pick up this book, there was a bunch of books there, and I was like, "Well, which one should I take?" And the guy was like, "Well, get this one by Emily Wilson because it's the best translation." And it was the only woman's translation, so I was like, "All right, well, that's Cool. So I'll get that one.
Have you have you ever read it?
I mean, we did like, in high school, like the very pared down versions of it,
Mm,
and whatever else. But so far, I mean, again, like all things, you take it for granted how much translation matters. So, right, reading about Bras Cubas, that was I did a very sort of newer edition of the translation that like went back in and really stylized it as much as it could for the humor, in the Portuguese, right? And so, yeah, I think it's one of those things we don't appreciate enough. Like you don't just run it through Google Translate and
mhm.
there's your book. Like there's nuances to that, both, culturally and stuff like that, to make sure it all relates to whoever's reading it. And so far, again, I've not read many versions of the Odyssey, but this one, I have to say, Emily Wilson sure seems to have done a really good job.
Yeah, I have read the Odyssey, and I also, first of all, congratulations. I mean, it's a great story, and I definitely understand with the translations and like how it's still relevant, even like all these years afterwards. And when you're done with that, I highly suggest you read the Iliad as well, because that's a nice compendium follow-up to continuation of it. And then, yeah, so what I think the recent book that I just rented, One Italian Summer by Rebecca Searle. You know,
Nice.
we have done the discussion in 5 years, which both of us loved. And I was like, okay, I'm probably gonna love this one too. So I have yet to start that one. So that's on my upcoming list. And speaking of upcoming lists, Phil, our next book.
Yeah, so, this will be a fun one. So it's Diana Wynne Jones's Howl's Moving Castle, which was made into Hayao Miyazaki movie. They are a little bit different, and she appreciates the movie as much as she appreciates her book. Um, and yeah, this should be fun and light and easy. When I went to pick this book up, I was looking around for it, and they're like, "Oh, it's in the kids section." I was like, "Oh, cool."
Nice.
So, it's like we've in the past read James and the Giant Peach from Roald Dahl and stuff like that. And so, this one's a little bit thicker than that, but all the same should be fairly easy to read. But that doesn't mean it's any less fun. It doesn't mean it's any less moving and stuff like that. No pun intended, based on the title.
And
So yeah,
adventurous. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm personally looking forward to it's been a while since I saw the movie, so I'm gonna hold off on that. I'm gonna read the book first, and then it'll be fun to see the differences between the two. So
Yeah, absolutely. And as per usual, I still have yet to decide our book for March. We'll know, but I would be remiss if we didn't finish this conversation saying, like, this particular discussion, The Five Wishes of Murray McBride, is actually the first book in a trilogy. There's The Final Wish of Murray McBride, which is already out there and published. And not to make our show timely and timestamp it, The First Wish of Murray McBride is actually being released in March 2025. And that's more of a prequel to the first two books because the plot of that one is really Mr. Murray and Jenny's relationship before when they're younger. So it's like that's a nice ending out and rounding out this series. So maybe read that when it comes around to March, but we'll figure out what we're gonna read for March. But you also have our next discussion after that in April.
yeah, so part of me is trying to pick books that more people have read as well, and or might want to read. So I picked Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, classic. I mean, hell, the way things are going, we're just gonna be picking books off the banned book re list soon enough.
Yeah,
Uh,
seriously.
but yeah, so I've read Toni Morrison before. This one I haven't read, so I'm looking forward to this one. Yeah, I think she's a phenomenal writer, so looking forward to it. This one,
Looking forward to it.
it's going to be a little bit, heavier, but definitely true to life. She's great at capturing truth and the realities of humanity, but also some of the unfortunate darker sides of it too.
Yeah.
So
Hey, I love heavy stories. I mean, heck, this book got heavier and I didn't even expect it. So, yeah, looking forward to that. Thank you everyone for tuning in, reading this book, talking along with us, and like you know, we'd love to hear your thoughts about these books. And so we will see you for our next books discussion. Bye, everyone.